What's up guys, welcome to AnimeKouhai. If you want to help me out, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel.
Yuki had painfully figured out what Ghee was planning, but he couldn't muster a retort. His remaining confidence disappeared from his face. He started analyzing the situation, desperately trying to figure out a way to get through this. His genius brain had come to the conclusion that the gap in power was light years across, but Yuki was not going to give up. He was searching for all possibilities. The only ray of hope he could grasp onto was that Ghee was underestimating them. I can't fault him for looking down on me when he really is leagues ahead, but as it stands, he's a bit too cocky. Yuki had other trump cards. They were the superpower he was born with, as well as the greedy one he had taken from Maribel. In addition, he had his creator, which could create whatever skill he required for the situation. Using creator could help him overcome this disaster. You'll regret that you didn't kill me when you had the chance. Steadying his breath, Yuki faced Ghee again.
Don't get cocky just because I've shown a fraction of my power.
He wasn't being a sore loser, he meant it. If he could make his opponent angry, he would lose composure and make mistakes. That was his plan. As he spoke, Yuki allowed his power to surge through his body. He now used the power he usually suppressed, concentrating his mind on a singular task, to remodel his body to fit his will. He evolved from a human to a sage, and then once more to become a saint. He evolved to a form surpassing Hinata herself, and ceased to breathe. A fully evolved saint was equal to a spiritual life form. While Hinata was still being limited by her body, Yuki had reached a higher plane of existence. Now, he had overcome the need to breathe at all. He cast out the weaknesses of humanity and greatly elevated his existence. If he were to convert all his energy into magicules, he could rival Leon and Rumina's. Yet, Ghee was not fazed by this either.
How disappointing. Is that all you're capable of? You won't be able to win against me, even if we fought 1,000,000 times over.
He said dismissively, nonchalant as always.
Perhaps. In that case, I'll do my best to entertain you.
Yuki's proclamation kicked off the battle anew. A second later, Yuki learned why Ghee was regarded as the strongest demon lord. The scene was desperate. Yuki was lying on the ground, physically outmatched. Against Ghee's overwhelming strength, none of Yuki's attacks worked. It was no use trying any more tricks. Not even his strongest, most polished attack could leave a scratch on Ghee.
Damn it all.
Yuki didn't have the strength to even get up again. The most he could do was curse at Ghee. At this point his prevailing resilience was praiseworthy. Laplace's eyes were glued to the battle. He could never forget what he saw unfold. This is just too wild. It ain't boss being too weak, it's Ghee being out of this world. Yuki's strength exceeded Laplace's imagination. Making use of his strange power, psychokinesis, Yuki was pulling out all the stops to see what would work on Ghee. He was lobbing stones, igniting fires, applying force, and releasing mental interference waves. Yet, all of this was easily countered. Even though he was using ridiculous strength, 30 times stronger than an average human, to launch attacks at speeds over 100 meters per second, his attacks were child's play to Ghee. Yuki's primary way of defense, anti-skill, was no exception. It was unable to stop Ghee's magic after a few hits.
That won't work on me anymore.
Ghee taunted. It appeared that he had figured out how to counter anti-skill somehow. That was a horrifying fact. Kazalim and Clayman had mentioned the 10 great demon lords in the past. They had emphasized that Ghee and Milam were particularly strong, but this vast difference was unfathomable. Had they been aware of it sooner, they would never have agreed to the naive ambition of conquering the world. So this the power of a catastrophe class. Laplace had finally learned his place in the food chain, and that he should avoid those at the top. He had always chosen to hide his true strength from even his closest companions, yet against a demon lord like Ghee, he wouldn't have even made a scratch. Ghee was on a whole other plane of existence compared to them. Laplace couldn't even spot an opening for an attack. Even Yuki, who was certainly stronger than him, was lying helplessly on the ground like a baby. With how things had developed, it'd be easier to travel to space than to come out of this alive. Someone has to make a sacrifice. Laplace made up his mind. He put on his usual half-hearted attitude and stepped in front of Ghee.
Magnificent, Demon Lord Ghee-sama. We, the moderate clown troupe, are open to any business requests. Currently, we are already employed by Yuki over there. Since our boss has lost now, we may logically consider our contract terminated.
Huh? Laplace. What are you saying?
Laplace put on a front of betrayal, pretending to betray his companions, though rather flippantly. He didn't know what Ghee's personality was exactly, but heard he was remarkably selfish and arrogant. He seemed completely uninterested in the weak. Unless he recognized you, you were not permitted to speak with him. Laplace approaching Ghee with this attitude was flirting with death. But at the same time, it also meant that he had Ghee's attention. This could give Yuki just enough time to make his escape. Laplace made his gamble. Never betray your companions and never betray your client. That was the golden rule of the moderate clown troupe. That's why Laplace thought Yuki would for sure be able to pick up on his unspoken plan. Footman was too much of a loose cannon and not the sharpest tool in the shed, but he was also very thoughtful of his companions. Tyr was actually stronger than Clayman, yet she was too timid to show her true ability. And even though both of them had the bad habit of getting over their heads sometimes, they worked fine under Yuki. It was because of this that Laplace decided to sacrifice himself.
I'm sure I'd be of help to Ghee-sama, so what do ya say, at least spare me my life.
Laplace shamelessly declared in open treachery. Footman and Tyr were in utter confusion, while Ghee looked on with curiosity, as the edges of his mouth slowly widened into a grin. Great, I just have to keep this up and Ghee will surely be pissed off. Laplace didn't plan to dig his own grave, either. There was little hope with Ghee as your opponent, but he still had a slim chance of saving his life. That's why he wasn't going to hesitate anymore and decided to finish his sentence. But just before he could say it out loud.
Don't push yourself like that, Laplace. Seriously, am I really that unreliable?
Someone spoke before Laplace. It was Yuki, shakily standing up. Yuki braced himself for his own death. At this moment, his heart filled with unquenchable resentment. He was angry at his own powerlessness. He was even angrier when he heard what Laplace said. Yuki had managed to interpret Laplace's words correctly. Laplace would never betray him. In other words, what he had said was all an act. Even when Yuki was in such a sorry state, Laplace still chose to have faith in him. His mind was swirling with joy, but also guilt. If only I had more power. Realistically, nobody would be there to respond to his desperate thought. Yet at that moment, something spoke inside Yuki's mind.
You want power? You need my help.
Yuki was baffled. He thought he might have been hallucinating from the exhaustion, but the voice definitely sounded real.
Just raid places with me. You will attain the strongest power. Your wish is to conquer the world. Taking my help will make it a cakewalk. Come on, make your decision.
The strange voice's proposition irritated Yuki. Shut up. I am me. It may be different from borrowing the strength of my companions, but I won't stoop so low as to borrow a stranger's power to fulfill my ambition. Yuki was confident in his choice to reject the offer. After all, going after a personal ambition would only be meaningful if it were achieved without outside help. Yuki had his principles, too. The voice fell silent, seemingly confused about his unexpected response. Changing gears, Yuki quickly brought his mind back to the situation at hand, disregarding the voice he could no longer hear. Even though the situation had become desperate, something caught Yuki's attention. He realized that Ghee must have had some goal. Indeed, while Ghee likely wanted to engage in battle, there must be some other reason. Ghee said something along the lines of, I don't want Rudra to gain more strength. In other words, if he would not go into the Eastern Empire and assist Rudra, Ghee wouldn't need to kill Yuki and his companions. At least, that's how Yuki interpreted it. So, then why didn't Ghee kill Yuki immediately? Seriously, toe-to-toe, I have no chance against him. My next play is a battle of wits. But instead of Laplace offering to take the fall, this will have a better chance of succeeding. Yuki regained his confidence and stood up once more. Yuki brushed back his bangs and put on a defiant smile, in spite of his circumstances.
I didn't expect you to be so strong, clearly surpassing my calculations.
Yuki conceded.
But I've seen through your plan. You weren't going to kill us after all, were you?
Hey, what makes you think that?
Ghee sneered.
If you had planned to do that, you would have obliterated us by now. With each attack, you only ever left me on the brink of death, never finishing me off. Why?
The confidence in his voice was palpable. He was being incredibly reckless. How could Yuki talk to Ghee like that after seeing his immense strength? Nobody could understand Yuki. Nobody except for Ghee, who was rather intrigued.
So you noticed, but you don't need to know the answer.
Ghee's response made it clear that he wouldn't reveal anything else. Yuki shrugged. He had expected this answer, so he began to calmly execute his next plan.
Then I want to make a deal with you.
You want to make a deal?
Yeah, if you let us go, we can be of help to you.
Be of help to me?
Indeed. It sounds like you don't want us to join the Eastern Empire, but I hope I could sway your mind otherwise.
Keep going.
Since our goal is to conquer the world, we will eventually become an enemy of the Empire. I have experienced the extent of your great power just now. Knowing it, I don't want to be your enemy. Because of that, destroying the Empire first would be much easier.
Yuki's explanation was just confusing nonsense to everyone else. Footman and Tyr were lost. Laplace was confused about the current situation, too. He was prepared to die for his plan, yet his only hope, Yuki himself, threw a wrench into the whole thing. All that was left for him was to hope that Yuki's negotiations went well. Even so, Yuki's rash words made Laplace sweat profusely. This is way too reckless. The reasoning is absurd, but why does it seem like Ghee is enjoying this? Indeed. As Yuki said this, strangely, Ghee cracked a smile.
You still intend on challenging me?
That's only natural. My ambition is to conquer the world, after all. Right now, I don't seem to stand a chance against you. But one day, I'll eventually surpass you.
Yuki could barely stand because of his wounds, yet he still talked big to Ghee. Thoughts like, pissing off Ghee would get me killed, didn't even cross Yuki's mind while he was talking. But this was Ghee he was talking to, so his attitude turned out to be the right call. Had he begun to pathetically plea for his life, Ghee would have immediately lost interest, a surefire way to get them all killed. Unbeknownst to him, he had played all his cards right.
So you're saying that it'll be good for me if you manage to take down the Empire?
The conversation had reached its turning point. Yuki had to execute his plan cautiously. He shifted his gaze back to Ghee and nodded affirmatively.
Of course. I don't know the exact reason, but you don't seem to want the Empire to invade the West. Is that right?
Ghee must have some connection with the Emperor, Rudra. That was the key. Yuki turned up the act.
I have many enemies ahead of me to bring down, and I intend to join the Empire. However, I don't intend to be under its control. Instead, I will destroy it from within and turn it into a puppet of ours.
I see. You will get help from the Empire while your goals still align, but they might not be the same afterward. You want to borrow the strength of the Empire to defeat Leon, and probably that Rimuru as well, right?
Ghee's sharp eyes seemed to have seen through it all as he stared at Yuki. There was no turning back for him now. He didn't know what kind of relationship Ghee had with Leon, nor what he thought of Rimuru. He couldn't even predict how Ghee would react as he replied. Despite it all, Yuki still decided to express his ambition deliberately.
That's it for this video, guys. Thank you for always watching my videos and supporting my channel. Shoutout to Jaka Purnama, Bien, Samanisan, Tokenum, Luminous Sekati, Nightcore Asuna, Echo Plasma, The Pacifist Anarchist, Michael Lee Connors, and last but not the least, shoutout to Harshal Chauhan.